The dojo was quiet at first, filled only with the sound of feet shuffling across polished floors. Students lined up, bowing respectfully as the black belts entered with confidence, their crisp uniforms snapping as they moved. Among them stood a simple woman, dressed plainly, looking more like someone who had wandered in by mistake than a fighter. She was soft-spoken, polite, and clearly new to the room. No one knew her name, only that she had signed up for the beginner's class. To the others, she seemed harmless, almost out of place in a world of strict training and hard discipline. But soon, whispers started to spread. Some of the senior students smirked, doubting she would last a single session. A few of the black belts even began testing her, circling with sharp words and subtle challenges, as if daring her to break under pressure. They expected her to be intimidated, maybe even walk out. Yet, behind her calm eyes was something none of them could see. She had walked into this class with a secret past, one built not on theory, but on survival. The tension grew as the instructor called for partner drills. Eyes shifted toward her, waiting to see her fail. The black belts exchanged knowing looks, already planning to teach her a lesson. The room filled with energy, the kind that comes before a storm, as everyone wondered how long she could keep up. What they didn't realize was that this simple woman wasn't here to prove herself to anyone. She was here for a reason, one that would soon turn their doubts into shock. As the first challenge came her way, her quiet nature shifted, revealing a side no one expected. And that's when everything began to change. The woman's movements were quiet, almost hesitant, as she stepped onto the mat. To the others, it looked like nerves, but in truth, she was studying every detail, the way the black belts stood, how they carried themselves, the little signs of arrogance hidden behind their polite bows. She had been in places like this before, though not inside a dojo. Her training came from life, not from structured lessons. Years of learning how to react quickly, defend herself, and fight back when cornered had shaped her into someone very different than what her appearance suggested. The instructor paired her with one of the more confident black belts, a tall man known for his powerful strikes. Whispers rose in the room again. Bets whispered under breaths about how quickly she would stumble or give up. But she only nodded politely, offering no hint of what she was truly capable of. Her hands remained steady, her breathing calm, as if she had prepared for this moment long before she ever walked through the door. As the drills began, the black belt pushed harder than necessary, testing her patience. His kicks came fast, his strike sharp, as if to remind her where she stood in the hierarchy. But every time, she adjusted, moving with quiet precision. It wasn't flashy, and it wasn't meant to impress anyone. It was natural, instinctive, and that made some of the other students uneasy. The simple woman no one had expected to last 5 minutes was now moving in ways that didn't make sense for a beginner. She was too balanced, too calm under pressure. The black belts exchanged looks, confusion spreading among them. Who was she really? And why did someone with that kind of presence choose to hide in plain sight inside their dojo? The air inside the dojo grew heavier with each passing drill. What began as curiosity soon turned into quiet unease. The black belts, who usually commanded the floor with authority, found themselves unsettled by her calm presence. Every time they tried to test her, she responded with just enough precision to defuse the moment without showing off. It was almost as if she was holding back, measuring each move carefully, revealing only a fraction of what she could do. That restraint made her even more mysterious. Some of the younger students watched with wide eyes, drawn to her quiet strength. They had entered the class hoping to learn discipline and technique, yet here was someone who seemed to carry both naturally without needing recognition. The whispers among them shifted from doubt to wonder. Still, the black belts weren't ready to let her presence go unchallenged. To them, it felt like their authority was being threatened by a woman who had never even tied a proper martial arts belt before. Outside the drills, the tension spilled into small interactions. One student, curious but cautious, asked her where she had trained before. She simply smiled and said, "Life has been my teacher," offering no further detail. That answer spread quickly, fueling rumors. Some thought she had a military background. Others believed she had once been in dangerous situations she'd rather not discuss. No one could confirm anything, and that uncertainty only made the questions louder. Meanwhile, the instructor watched closely. He had taught for years, seen countless beginners come and go, but he recognized something different in her. She wasn't there to prove herself, yet her silence carried more weight than the loudest boast. He began to wonder whether this simple woman might soon shift the balance inside his dojo in ways no one expected. The dojo was no longer filled with the steady rhythm of drills, but with the sharp energy of rivalry. Every black belt wanted a chance to test her, to push the quiet woman past her limits, and expose what they assumed had to be weakness. One after another, they paired with her, striking harder, moving faster, trying to force a mistake. Yet each time, she remained steady, her balance never shaken. She didn't strike back to dominate, but her subtle counters and perfect timing left them unsettled, almost as if they were the ones being studied. The instructor, sensing the tension building, called for a sparring round. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The black belts exchanged glances, their pride now on the line. They didn't just see her as a beginner anymore. They saw her as a challenge to their standing in the dojo. When the instructor asked for volunteers, more than one hand shot up. Whispers filled the room again. Some students leaned forward, eager to see the mystery unfold. Others looked nervous, sensing this wasn't going to be a normal sparring match. She stepped onto the mat without hesitation, her expression calm, almost serene. The black belt chosen to face her bowed stiffly, his pride already pushing him to go all out. Around them, the room fell into silence, the tension so sharp it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. Everyone knew something was about to happen. This wasn't just a test of skill anymore, it was a clash of respect, ego, and hidden strength. The simple woman who had entered the dojo as an outsider now stood at the center, with every eye locked on her next move. The moment before the first strike carried more suspense than anyone had expected. The first strike came fast, sharper than most students had ever seen in a sparring match. The black belt lunged forward with full confidence, expecting her to stumble. But in a blink, she shifted, her body flowing with an ease that seemed impossible for a beginner. The attack missed, leaving him off balance, and she only needed the smallest movement to redirect his energy. Gasps rippled across the dojo. It wasn't luck. She had done it with purpose. But before anyone could process what had happened, the instructor's voice cut in, calm yet commanding. He stepped forward, his eyes locked on her, as though he had finally recognized what others had missed. For years he had been the unchallenged center of authority in this dojo, respected by all, and yet in that moment he seemed wary. The students exchanged uneasy glances, realizing the sparring match had become more than a test. It had drawn the instructor himself into the conflict. Then came the twist no one expected. Another senior black belt, one who rarely spoke but carried quiet influence, stepped forward and addressed her directly. He claimed he had seen her before, outside the dojo, years ago, in a very different setting. His words carried weight, and suddenly the whisper stopped. The mystery deepened. Who was this woman really, and what history was now resurfacing in front of everyone? The stakes rose instantly. It was no longer about one sparring round or proving herself as a beginner. The dojo had become a stage where secrets, pride, and unspoken rivalries were colliding. The simple woman, once dismissed as harmless, now stood as the center of a storm that threatened to shake the order of the entire class. And the next move would decide everything. The dojo floor grew silent as all eyes fixed on her. The black belt who had spoken seemed certain of his memory, his words echoing like a challenge. The woman, however, did not flinch. Instead, she offered a small, steady smile and bowed once more, acknowledging both him and the instructor. It was a gesture of respect, yet it carried a quiet power that unsettled everyone watching. The sparring resumed, but now the energy had shifted. The instructor himself stepped onto the mat, signaling that he would face her. Students held their breath. This was no longer just practice, it was the ultimate test. He moved with speed and authority, his strikes sharp and calculated, the kind that had humbled countless students over the years. Yet with every attack, she flowed around him, her movements precise and controlled, as though she had been waiting for this very moment. The clash built in intensity until finally, with one perfectly timed counter, she redirected his strongest strike and brought him to a halt. She did not harm him, nor did she gloat. She simply stopped him cold, proving in front of everyone that her strength was undeniable. The dojo erupted in disbelief, some gasping, others cheering. The black belts who once doubted her now stood in silence, their pride tempered by respect. But just as it seemed the conflict had reached its end, the unexpected twist arrived. The instructor rose slowly, nodded in acknowledgement, and then said something no one expected. "You weren't here to learn, you were here to watch us." His words cast a new shadow over the room. The students exchanged uneasy looks, realizing her presence had never been about proving herself in the dojo. She had a different purpose, one that still remained hidden. The victory was clear, yet the mystery was far from over. The room stayed silent after the instructor's words, the students caught between awe and confusion. The woman bowed again, her eyes calm, her voice soft, as she finally spoke the truth. She explained that she had come not to challenge anyone, but to remind herself of discipline and balance. Years ago, she had lived through situations where fighting was never about winning trophies or belts, it was about survival. That life had shaped her, but she had chosen to leave it behind. The dojo wasn't her battlefield. It was her chance to begin again. Her honesty softened the atmosphere. The black belts who had once mocked her now lowered their heads, realizing they had underestimated more than her skill, they had underestimated her story. The younger students, who had looked on with wide eyes, now understood that true strength was not about titles or uniforms, but about resilience, humility, and control. Even the instructor, who had faced countless challengers in his career, offered her a respectful bow, acknowledging that her presence had tested not just their techniques, but their character. As class ended, the woman gathered her things quietly, leaving behind no boast, no demand for recognition. Yet her impact lingered. The students whispered less about her mystery and more about what they had learned from her. They spoke of patience, hidden strength, and the value of respecting every person who walks into a dojo, no matter how they appear. By the time she stepped out into the evening air, she was no longer just the simple woman they thought they knew. She had reminded them all that the most powerful fighters are often the ones who carry their strength in silence. And with that, her story in the dojo came to a close, leaving behind lessons they would never forget.